Welcome to Thalira Tales, where stories bloom in silence, carrying emotion, mystery, and hidden truth. Step in and let the tale unfold.
The SUV is full. You stay home and clean up this mess, my mother-in-law snapped at me, as they were heading out for a weekend beach trip to Malibu. I simply replied, "All right, Mom." But secretly, I booked a first-class ticket for a solo vacation to Maui and left a little surprise on the dining table. When my mother-in-law finally came home, she screamed hysterically and almost passed out. "Sorry, I already cleaned up all the trash," I whispered to myself with a smile, knowing exactly what I had done. The morning air was still crisp, but the inside of the suburban house had been buzzing with activity long before the sun even peeked over the horizon. Jasmine was already in the kitchen, preparing everything needed for today's family beach trip. Her hands moved swiftly, chopping ingredients, tossing a gourmet truffle pasta salad, and carefully packing premium seafood into a high-end Yeti cooler to keep it fresh. As a wife and a daughter-in-law, Jasmine always tried to play her part perfectly. She made sure all her husband's and mother-in-law's needs were met without a single complaint, even when exhaustion weighed heavily on her bones. In this house, Jasmine was treated more like a live-in maid than a family member. Every chore from deep cleaning the house and cooking the meals to paying the mortgage and utility bills fell squarely on her shoulders. Her husband Kevin's salary from his corporate job was always unaccounted for, constantly drained by mysterious business expenses or handed over to his mother, Barbara, to fund her lavish lifestyle. The sound of footsteps echoed toward the kitchen. Barbara appeared, her face carrying its usual haughty expression, wearing far too much expensive makeup for a casual trip to the beach. She glanced at the kitchen island where Jasmine was packing the cooler. Not a single smile or word of gratitude left the older woman's lips. Instead, she offered biting remarks about how the sandwiches were cut unevenly and complained that the salad dressing lacked flavor. Jasmine swallowed hard, pushing down the tightness in her chest, and replied with a soft, accommodating tone to every critique. She was used to her mother-in-law's cold treatment. Shortly after, Kevin emerged from the master bedroom. Her husband was dressed sharply in designer resort wear, his hair perfectly styled, smirking at his smartphone screen as his thumbs tapped away. Kevin didn't even look at Jasmine as he walked past her to grab a bottle of water from the fridge. The atmosphere grew even stranger when a knock echoed from the front door. Barbara enthusiastically rushed to open it. Cheerful laughter soon drifted in from the living room. Jasmine finished tying up the cooler bags and carried them to the front. There, she saw a young, glamorous woman sitting on the plush sofa right next to Kevin. The woman's name was Jessica. Barbara introduced her as Kevin's coworker who needed a fun weekend getaway and decided to tag along for their family trip. Jasmine stared at Jessica, who shot her a sly, condescending smirk. Jessica's behavior didn't show a hint of awkwardness for being an uninvited guest. Instead, she acted incredibly touchy and flirtatious with Kevin. Barbara shamelessly praised Jessica's beauty, loudly comparing her to Jasmine, who she claimed always looked so drab and washed out from spending too much time in the kitchen. Once everything was ready, they walked out to the driveway where the luxury SUV was parked. Jasmine carried 2 heavy tote bags filled with food and drinks, while Kevin and Jessica strolled casually without carrying a single thing. Barbara walked ahead, loudly chatting with Jessica about their plans to rent a private speedboat and dine at an exclusive waterfront restaurant once they reached Malibu. Jasmine loaded the heavy bags into the trunk and smoothed out her clothes. She adjusted her wide-brimmed sun hat, fixed her hair, and stepped toward the rear passenger door to get in. But just as her hand brushed the door handle, Barbara aggressively swatted it away. Jasmine gasped, stepping back. She looked at her mother-in-law with pure confusion. "Hold on. The SUV is full. You stay home and clean up this mess," Barbara barked, her shrill voice shattering the quiet suburban morning. Jasmine froze. She looked inside the vehicle. It was true that Kevin was already in the driver's seat, while Jessica comfortably occupied the front passenger seat. In the middle row, Barbara had already claimed the spacious leather captain's chairs for herself. The only thing left was the cramped third-row seating, which was currently folded down to hold the cooler and beach gear. But even for a tiny spot in the back, Barbara was explicitly forbidding her from joining. Jasmine looked at Kevin, praying her husband would say anything to defend her. But Kevin just looked away, pretending to adjust the air conditioning and turning up the radio. He didn't have the slightest intention of standing up for the wife who had been awake since dawn cooking for them. Just as Jasmine felt the crushing weight of humiliation, the front door of the house opened. Arthur, her father-in-law, walked out with slow, heavy steps. He stared at the scene in the driveway with a tense expression. For years, Arthur had stayed quiet to avoid triggering his wife's explosive tantrums. But this time, he felt Barbara had crossed the line. Arthur approached, trying to mediate. "Barbara, Jasmine is Kevin's wife. Why is Jessica getting in the car instead of her? Let Jasmine come." "This is a family trip," he pleaded in a soothing tone. Barbara glared daggers at her husband, her face turning red with rage at having her authority challenged in front of an outsider. "Jessica is Kevin's top client liaison. She brings in money. She helps him at the firm. Jasmine just belongs at home with a mop. Besides, she's used to staying indoors. She doesn't belong at a high-end beach club. Keep your mouth shut, Arthur, and stay out of women's business." Barbara spat, pointing a manicured finger at his face. Arthur clenched his fists. He looked at his son. "Kevin, you are a married man. Are you really going to let your wife be treated like this?" Kevin rolled his eyes, muted the music, and looked at his father through the half-rolled-down window. "Dad, you're being so dramatic. Just let Jasmine stay home. The car is cramped anyway if she comes. Jessica is our guest. We have to treat her right. Just get in, Dad, before we hit the Pacific Coast Highway traffic." Jasmine took a deep breath. She locked eyes with Arthur for a brief second, giving him a subtle nod and a remarkably calm smile to reassure him. She didn't want her father-in-law getting into a screaming match because of her. Jasmine turned her gaze back to Barbara, who was still staring at her with utter contempt. Not a single tear fell from Jasmine's eyes. She simply pressed her lips together and nodded slowly. "All right, Mom," Jasmine replied, her voice crisp and clear. Hearing that submissive answer, Barbara scoffed in satisfaction. She slammed the car door shut. Arthur, his shoulders slumped in defeat, got into the back seat next to his wife. The engine roared to life, and the SUV slowly pulled out of the driveway. Jasmine stood tall on the porch, watching the vehicle disappear down the street. From the rearview mirror of the departing car, Arthur looked back at his daughter-in-law with eyes full of sorrow and regret. But a few seconds later, Arthur's older model smartphone buzzed quietly in his shirt pocket. He pulled it out and read the newly arrived text message. It was from Jasmine. "Get ready, Dad. Today we end it all." Arthur read the message in his head. A faint, almost imperceptible smile, unnoticed by anyone else in the car, formed on his lips. He deleted the text and slid the phone back into his pocket. Meanwhile, back on the porch, Jasmine turned around. She walked inside and locked the front door tight. Today, she was truly going to clean up all the trash in this house, ripping it out by its very roots. The sudden silence of the empty house didn't make Jasmine feel lonely. She walked through the spacious living room, trailing her fingers over the expensive modern furniture, almost all of which she had bought with her own hard-earned money. Jasmine worked as a highly sought-after freelance consultant, pulling in an income that dwarfed Kevin's corporate salary. For years, she had hidden her true financial success, just so her husband wouldn't feel emasculated. Her kindness and understanding had been ruthlessly exploited by Kevin and Barbara. Jasmine walked into her small home office in the corner of the house, flipped on the switch, and sat down at her oak desk. She didn't grab a broom or a mop like her mother-in-law had ordered. Instead, she opened her MacBook. The screen lit up, reflecting a face that was completely devoid of emotion. Her memory flashed back to a rainy afternoon a few weeks ago, the day the family's rotten secrets were finally unearthed. She had been organizing her mother-in-law's walk-in closet, while Barbara was out at a country club luncheon. While cleaning out the bottom drawer, Jasmine discovered a small leather ledger hidden beneath a pile of designer scarves. Before she could put it back, Arthur walked into the room. Instead of getting angry, he quietly closed the bedroom door and urged Jasmine to read the ledger. Written meticulously inside were records of massive debts owed to shady private lenders and loan sharks. The total was astronomical, reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The debts had been racked up by Barbara to buy luxury handbags, fine jewelry, and fund her high society facade to impress her snobby country club friends. Arthur then confessed everything, fighting back tears. "I can't take it anymore. Sweetheart, they're threatening to put a lien on the house. But that's not the only thing breaking my heart," Arthur had said that day. He then handed a small USB flash drive to Jasmine. Stored inside were dozens of photos, hotel receipts, and saved text messages that Arthur had secretly compiled. The evidence proved that Kevin had been having a long-term affair with Jessica. Jessica wasn't just a coworker, she was Kevin's mistress, constantly demanding designer gifts and expensive vacations. The sickest irony was that the money Kevin used to spoil Jessica came straight out of the joint checking account, an account that Jasmine diligently filled with her own earnings every single month. Leave, Jasmine. Don't let this family destroy you. They don't deserve you. I refuse to let you shoulder the sins and the debts of this house, Arthur had whispered with tear-filled eyes as he placed the evidence in her hands. That memory only solidified Jasmine's resolve. Snapping back to the present, her fingers flew across the keyboard. She opened the heavily encrypted folders she had been organizing for weeks. She turned on the laser printer beside her desk. Page after page began to slide out of the machine. The first stack was copies of bank statements showing the exact flow of funds from her joint account directly to Jessica's personal accounts. The next stack contained crystal-clear photos of Kevin and Jessica at upscale rooftop bars and luxury hotels. The final stack was a copy of Barbara's debt ledger, complete with the names and phone numbers of the ruthless loan sharks she owed. Jasmine printed everything in duplicate, one set for her divorce attorney, and one set to leave in the house as a parting gift. Once the documents were printed, she organized them neatly and slipped them into a bright red folder. She stared at the folder, feeling a profound sense of relief. The crushing weight on her chest had finally lifted, but she wasn't done yet. Jasmine opened her web browser and navigated to a travel booking site. With complete composure, she booked the next available flight to Maui, Hawaii, a tropical paradise where no one from her past could ever find or bother her. She selected a first-class seat. It was wildly expensive, but she didn't care. She paid for it using a private offshore account she had kept completely hidden from Kevin. A confirmation screen popped up. Her flight was secured. She printed the boarding pass and folded it neatly. Next, she opened an Amtrak booking portal. She typed in her father-in-law's name and purchased a premium sleeper ticket heading to a quiet, picturesque town in Vermont. But she didn't stop there. She logged onto a real estate platform and rented a beautiful, cozy cottage with a massive backyard, perfect for gardening. Jasmine knew Arthur loved horticulture, but was never allowed to touch the yard because Barbara thought dirty boots and soil would ruin her pristine aesthetic. Jasmine leased the Vermont cottage for a full year up front and paid it off instantly. Jasmine leaned back in her ergonomic chair. All the tickets and housing arrangements were finalized. She looked around the house. The massive French door refrigerator in the kitchen, the 8.5-inch OLED TV in the living room, the central air conditioning system, right down to the plush velvet sofa Jessica had been sitting on. She had paid for every single item with her own money. She picked up her phone and dialed the number of an elite professional moving company she had spoken with a few days prior. Hello, yes, this is Jasmine. Just like we agreed yesterday, I need your crew at my address immediately. We're moving everything on the inventory list today. Don't worry, the house is completely empty of people. I'll be overseeing the move myself, she said, her voice firm and authoritative. She ended the call and set the phone down. Jasmine stood up, smoothed her clothes, and walked into the master bedroom to pack her designer clothes, jewelry, and personal belongings into her luxury Rimowa suitcase. She folded her clothes one by one, feeling completely at peace. Everything was unfolding exactly according to the master plan she and Arthur had crafted. While Kevin, Barbara, and Jessica were speeding down the highway, laughing and blasting music on their way to the beach, they had no idea a Category 5 hurricane was about to wipe their fraudulent lives off the map. Jasmine zipped her suitcase shut with finality. She was ready to start a brand new chapter. She walked back to her home office, where her laptop screen was now displaying her online banking portal. She pulled out her wallet and lined up the credit cards she used to run the household. She stared at the six-figure balance in the joint checking account. That money was the result of her endless late nights, tight deadlines, and exhausted tears, all just to keep this family afloat. Meanwhile, Kevin contributed nothing but empty promises, claiming his money was tied up in a startup that never actually existed. Jasmine took a slow, deep breath and exhaled smoothly. She wasn't going to let these parasites enjoy another dime of her hard-earned money. With a few rapid clicks, she initiated a wire transfer, draining every single penny from the joint account into her new, untraceable private account. The balance on the screen instantly dropped to $0, but she wasn't finished. She picked up her phone and called the bank's VIP customer service line. Jasmine explicitly instructed the representative to permanently cancel all supplementary credit cards issued under Kevin's name. For years, Kevin had used his Platinum Amex to buy designer bags and expensive dinners for Jessica. When the agent asked for the reason, Jasmine calmly stated that the cards were being used fraudulently and she was closing the lines of credit permanently. Once she received confirmation that Kevin was financially cut off, she hung up. A faint smile touched her lips. The well that had watered the weeds in this house was now bone dry. Now, she just had to wait for them to realize they had nowhere left to draw from. At that exact moment, miles away from the quiet suburban neighborhood Jasmine was dismantling, the luxury SUV pulled into the valet parking lot of an ultra-exclusive, Michelin-starred seafood restaurant in Malibu. The ocean breeze blew in, carrying the fresh scent of salt water. Kevin stepped out of the driver's seat with unparalleled arrogance, popped his collar, and walked around to open Jessica's door. She stepped out with a coquettish smile, wrapping her arm tightly around his as if they were Hollywood's newest IT couple. Barbara climbed out of the back seat, her face glowing with pride. She looked around at the patio filled with celebrities, wealthy socialites, and rows of Ferraris and Porsches. She felt like she had finally reached the upper echelons of society. Meanwhile, Arthur trailed slowly behind them. The older man's face was completely stoic, his eyes blank. He couldn't enjoy a single second of this luxury, knowing it was built entirely on the suffering of his daughter-in-law. A hostess in a chic black dress greeted them at the entrance and escorted them to a prime VIP table right on the deck, overlooking the crashing waves. Once seated, the waiter handed them thick, leather-bound menus. Barbara flipped hers open, her eyes gleaming at the mouth-watering descriptions. The prices listed were easily in the hundreds of dollars per plate, but she couldn't care less. "Jessica, honey, order whatever your heart desires. Don't be shy. Get the most expensive thing on the menu. Kevin's paying for everything today. He just got a massive bonus at the firm," Barbara announced, intentionally raising her voice so the wealthy patrons at the next table would hear her. Jessica smiled widely and nodded. "Thank you, Barbara. In that case, I'll have the jumbo lobster thermidor, the Alaskan king crab legs, and the premium beluga caviar for the table." Kevin puffed out his chest, immensely proud to show off for his mistress. "Bring us your finest vintage champagne, too, and we'll take the grand seafood tower for an appetizer." The waiter jotted everything down rapidly, then turned to Arthur, who had been staring out at the Pacific Ocean the entire time. "And for you, sir?" Arthur shook his head gently without making eye contact. "Just a glass of tap water, please. I'm not hungry." Barbara scoffed loudly, clearly irritated by her husband. "You are always embarrassing me, Arthur. We're at a 5-star restaurant and you order tap water?" "Ignore him, waiter. He's just uncultured. He's not used to how rich people eat." Arthur didn't respond to the insult. He simply checked the watch on his wrist. His mind was miles away, thinking of Jasmine, knowing she was currently executing their plan back home. Time passed. Platter after platter of extravagant seafood was delivered to their massive table. Barbara, Kevin, and Jessica ate ravenously. They laughed loudly, fed each other bites of lobster, and bragged about taking a luxury vacation to Europe as if money flowed endlessly from their pockets. The feast lasted for over 2 hours. The massive plates were reduced to empty crab shells and smeared butter. Barbara let out a soft burp and dabbed her mouth with a linen napkin, looking exceptionally satisfied. "Check, please," Kevin called out, snapping his fingers in the air. The waiter quickly arrived, presenting a sleek leather booklet containing the bill. He softly recited the total, which came out to well over $2,000. Kevin, overflowing with confidence, whipped out his wallet and pulled out his Platinum Amex card. He pinched it between 2 fingers and handed it to the waiter. The waiter took the card and walked to the POS system. But less than 5 minutes later, the waiter returned, looking incredibly awkward. "I apologize, sir, but our system is declining this card. Do you have another form of payment? Or perhaps cash?" the waiter asked as politely as possible. Kevin furrowed his brow, feeling his ego shatter in front of Jessica. "That's impossible. There's over 100 grand on that limit. Your machine must be broken. Swipe it again, and do it right this time." The waiter went back and tried the card multiple times. The result was identical. The screen flashed a red alert indicating the account had been permanently closed. The waiter returned and explained the situation. Panic began to creep onto Kevin's face. He pulled out 3 other credit cards from his wallet and demanded the waiter try all of them. One by one they were swiped, and one by one they were declined. Kevin's face turned ghostly pale. Cold sweat formed on his temples. Barbara, outraged by the spectacle, stood up and slammed her hands on the table. "This is supposed to be a high-end establishment, and your machines don't even work? Don't you dare tell me my son's card is declined. We are incredibly wealthy. We could buy this entire restaurant." Barbara's screaming drew the attention of the entire patio. Everyone turned to stare at their table. Jessica shrunk down into her chair, deeply mortified at being the center of such a trashy public meltdown. She was already regretting coming on this trip. Amidst the chaos and the screaming match between Kevin, Barbara, and the restaurant manager who was now signaling for security, Arthur saw his golden opportunity. He stood up from his chair without drawing any attention. With calm, measured steps, Arthur slipped away from the table, walked through the side exit, and headed straight for the Pacific Coast Highway. He quickly hailed an Uber that happened to be dropping someone off, got in, and told the driver to speed away, leaving his family to face the consequences of their own actions. Exactly at 11:00 a.m., the roar of heavy diesel engines broke the quiet of the suburban street. 3 massive U-Haul moving trucks parked in a neat line in front of the house. A dozen burly professional movers jumped out and walked up to the front porch. Jasmine, who had been waiting, swung the front door wide open. She greeted the crew foreman and handed him a long, detailed clipboard inventory of what needed to go. The list encompassed roughly 90% of the home's interior. "Everything on this list needs to be loaded, guys. Be extremely careful with the electronics and the glass. The only things you are leaving behind are the bed in the guest room and that old wooden dining table in the center of the room. Everything else gets cleared out," Jasmine ordered, her voice authoritative and organized. The movers immediately swarmed the house. They began unhooking the massive 8.5-inch OLED TV and wrapping its glass media console. The central AC window units were pulled. The giant stainless steel smart fridge was wheeled out of the kitchen, followed by the washer, dryer, premium gas stove, the thick glass coffee table, and the expensive velvet sofa Jessica had been lounging on earlier. Jasmine stood in the center of the living room, watching the movers work with empty eyes. Every piece of furniture carried out the door took a bitter memory with it. That sofa was where she used to fall asleep, waiting for Kevin to come home from his late shifts. That fridge was what she stocked full of organic groceries every week, only for Barbara to devour it all with her country club friends. That TV was where Barbara sat all day, barking orders at Jasmine to bring her snacks and iced tea. In less than 2 hours, a house that was once overflowing with luxury was stripped down to a hollow, echoing shell. The walls looked barren. The expansive hardwood floors were completely exposed, leaving only faint, square dust outlines where the furniture used to sit. Jasmine instructed the foreman to lock the trucks. She handed him a thick envelope of cash to settle the bill, and provided the address of a secure climate-controlled storage unit where the items would be kept temporarily. The trucks fired up their engines and slowly drove away, carrying off the physical fruits of Jasmine's labor. Now, Jasmine stood completely alone in an empty house. The only large piece of furniture left was a sturdy oak dining table right in the middle of the room. She had intentionally left it behind because she needed the perfect display stand for the parting gifts she had prepared. Jasmine placed her Rimowa suitcase by the front door. She walked up to the dining table and placed the bright red folder dead center. It looked glaringly obvious against the bare wood. She opened the folder one last time to ensure the contents were perfectly arranged. On top lay the official divorce petition filed by her high-powered family court attorney. Underneath were dozens of 8x10 glossy photographs showing Kevin and Jessica's blatant infidelity, stapled to the bank wires proving Kevin's embezzlement. And at the very bottom was the original leather ledger detailing Barbara's massive debts to the loan sharks, a ticking time bomb ready to stop the old woman's heart. Satisfied, Jasmine grabbed a pen and a sticky note. In her elegant handwriting, she wrote a short message. "Sorry, I already cleaned up all the trash. Hope you enjoy how spotless the house is." She stuck the note to the cover of the red folder. But her surprises weren't over. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick blue envelope. Unlike the red folder, which signaled absolute destruction, the blue envelope was filled with profound love and respect. She set the blue envelope next to the red folder. Written on the front were the words, "For Dad." Inside, Jasmine had placed the keys to the Vermont cottage, the printed Amtrak sleeper ticket for that afternoon, and a massive stack of $100 bills, more than enough to cover his living expenses for the next several months. Not long after Jasmine finished setting the table, the sound of a car pulling up echoed outside. She looked through the window and saw Arthur stepping out of an Uber. The older man paid the driver and hurried up the walkway. As Arthur pushed open the front door and stepped inside, he froze. His eyes scanned the entirely empty, echoing room. His footsteps sounded hollow against the bare floorboards. Arthur looked at Jasmine, who was standing by her suitcase, greeting him with a warm smile. "You really cleaned it all out, didn't you, sweetheart?" Arthur said, his voice trembling with emotion. Jasmine nodded softly. She walked over and threw her arms around her father-in-law, the only person in this family who had ever shown her genuine kindness. Arthur hugged her back tightly, patting her back exactly the way a father hugs a daughter heading off to college. Tears welled up in the old man's eyes, not out of sadness, but out of immense relief that Jasmine was finally breaking her chains. "Dad, over on the table is a blue envelope for you. Inside are the keys to a beautiful cottage with a massive garden, your train ticket, and some cash. You need to leave right now, before they get back." "Don't ever look back, Dad. Go be happy, for your own sake," Jasmine said, her voice gentle but firm. Arthur pulled back, looked deeply into her eyes, and nodded resolutely. "Thank you, Jasmine. You are the best daughter a man could ever ask for. I pray God protects you wherever you go. Find your happiness and never let anyone make you feel small again." Jasmine smiled and grabbed the handle of her suitcase. The Uber Black she had requested was already waiting by the curb. She walked out the door, inhaling the fresh afternoon air. The crushing weight she had carried for years had simply evaporated. Jasmine climbed into the black SUV, waving one last time to Arthur. The car drove off, taking Jasmine toward Los Angeles International Airport, flying her toward a peaceful new life across the Pacific. Inside the empty house, Arthur picked up his blue envelope, cast a fleeting glance at the red folder that would soon obliterate his wife and son's arrogance, and walked out, locking the door behind him. The trap was set perfectly. Jasmine sat completely relaxed in a plush leather armchair inside the airport's exclusive first-class lounge. The atmosphere was a world away from the chaos she had just left behind. The marble floors gleamed, the lighting was warm, and the scent of lavender in the air gave her a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in years. She adjusted her silk scarf and took a sip of premium Earl Grey tea the lounge attendant had just brought her. She felt as if the years of trauma were evaporating into the air along with the steam from her teacup. She pulled her phone out of her bag, not to call anyone, but just to watch the endless stream of notifications exploding on her screen. Kevin's name appeared dozens of times in her missed calls list. The frantic text messages from her husband were piling up, ranging from confused questions about where she was to vicious, expletive-laden rants demanding to know why his credit cards were declining. Miles away, the situation was absolutely dire. Back at the Malibu restaurant, Kevin was standing with a flushed face, enduring the most humiliating moment of his life. Every patron was staring at him. In front of him stood the stern restaurant manager, flanked by two massive security guards. Barbara was still screaming, threatening to sue the restaurant for fraud, but her shrieking was only making things worse. The manager firmly stated he would be calling the police if the $2,000 bill wasn't settled immediately. Kevin frantically dug through his pockets, but he knew he didn't have that kind of cash. All his liquid assets were managed by Jasmine, and he was just now realizing he was entirely locked out. Jessica, who had tried to play the role of a wealthy socialite, now looked visibly panicked. She kept glancing at the exit, desperate to escape a situation that was shredding her reputation. She couldn't believe that Kevin, the man who constantly flaunted his wealth, couldn't even pay for a lunch tab. Jessica was quickly realizing she had hitched her wagon to the wrong horse. Barbara eventually burst into hysterical tears, not out of regret, but because she couldn't handle the disgusted, mocking glares of the actual rich people around her. Kevin tried calling Jasmine for the 50th time, but the automated operator informed him the number was no longer in service. Kevin had no idea that back in the airport lounge, Jasmine had popped out her SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed it into a trash can with unparalleled satisfaction. With no cash and dead credit cards, Kevin was forced to negotiate a humiliating deal with the manager. He had to hand over his vintage Rolex watch and Barbara's brand new iPhone 15 Pro Max as collateral, just so they wouldn't be arrested. The Rolex was his absolute pride and joy, the ultimate status symbol he used to project success. But now, it was gone, traded for the crab legs digesting in his stomach. Barbara shrieked when security confiscated her phone, but she had no choice. Once the collateral was secured, the three of them were escorted out of the restaurant with their heads hung in shame. There was no more laughter, no more arrogant boasting. When they reached the valet, they realized Arthur was completely gone. The SUV was there, but his father was nowhere to be found. Kevin checked the restrooms, but nothing. Barbara began cursing her husband, calling him a useless old coward for abandoning them. They had no idea Arthur was already sitting comfortably in the dining car of an Amtrak train, holding Jasmine's blue envelope, his ticket to freedom. Boiling with absolute rage, Kevin threw the SUV into drive and slammed on the gas. He wanted to get home immediately and unleash his fury on Jasmine. He swore he was going to teach her a lesson for humiliating him in front of his mistress and his mother. The 2-hour drive back through Los Angeles traffic was dead silent. There was no romantic banter between Kevin and Jessica. She just stared out the window with her arms crossed. Barbara just muttered angrily to herself, blaming the waiters, her husband, and Jasmine. Kevin drove recklessly, weaving through lanes. His only thought was dragging Jasmine by the arm and forcing her to unlock the bank accounts. On the other side of the city, an announcement echoed through the airport speakers, boarding Jasmine's flight to Maui. She stood up gracefully, rolled her carry-on to the gate, and stepped onto the plane. As she crossed the threshold into the first-class cabin, she felt like she was stepping into the light. She sank into her lie-flat pod, closed her eyes, and relished the overwhelming peace as the plane lifted off the runway, leaving her toxic past thousands of feet below. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon when Kevin's SUV screeched to a halt in their driveway. Kevin stormed out of the car, his face twisted in demonic anger, followed by a complaining Barbara and an exhausted, irritated Jessica. Kevin marched up to the porch and aggressively twisted the front doorknob. It was locked. He pounded his fists against the heavy wood until the sound echoed down the street, but there was no answer. "Jasmine, open the damn door. Stop hiding like a coward. Get out here right now," Kevin roared, kicking the door wildly. When the door didn't open, Kevin grabbed a heavy decorative rock from the landscaping and smashed the glass side panel next to the door. He reached his arm through the jagged glass, unlocked the deadbolt from the inside, and shoved the door open. But as the door swung wide, Kevin froze in the entryway. His eyes bulged out of his head. The living room, usually packed with expensive contemporary furniture, was totally empty. No plush sofa, no glass tables, not even the paintings on the wall. The sound of his own heavy breathing echoed in the cavernous space. Barbara and Jessica walked in behind him, stopping dead in their tracks at the sight of the ghost town interior. Barbara let out a panicked gasp and sprinted toward the master bedroom. Seconds later, a blood-curdling scream echoed from down the hall. Her room was completely bare. Her massive walk-in closet, once filled with Chanel bags and designer dresses, had been stripped. Only a few moth-eaten sweaters were left scattered on the floor. Barbara collapsed onto the cold hardwood, sobbing hysterically over her vanished treasure. Kevin sprinted into the kitchen. Same result. The massive fridge, the appliances, everything was gone. The only thing left in the center of the dining room was the old oak table. And sitting dead center was a glaring red folder with a sticky note on it. Kevin approached the table, his hands shaking violently. He read Jasmine's neat handwriting on the note. "Sorry, I already cleaned up all the trash. Hope you enjoy how spotless the house is." Kevin read it in a whisper, before letting out a primal scream of rage. He snatched the red folder and ripped it open. Glossy photos spilled all over the table and the floor. Images of him kissing Jessica at a hotel bar. Screenshots of his bank transfers funding Jessica's lifestyle. But what made Kevin's knees buckle was the sight of the official divorce summons from the family court attorney. Right next to it was the ledger detailing his mother's staggering debts. Hearing Kevin's screams, Barbara dragged herself into the dining room. When her tear-filled eyes landed on her debt ledger, all the color drained from her face. She realized her darkest, most destructive secret was completely exposed. "What the hell is this, Mom? You owe hundreds of thousands to loan sharks? Where did all the money I gave you go?" Kevin bellowed at his own mother. Barbara could only cover her face and sob, unable to formulate an excuse. Jessica, standing quietly by the doorway, looked at the photos of herself and the financial records. She realized the gravity of the situation. Terrified that this scandal would ruin her own career and life, she began slowly backing toward the front door. She finally understood that Kevin was dead broke, and the wealth he flaunted actually belonged to the wife he had just alienated. Kevin noticed Jessica trying to sneak out and lunged toward her. Jessica, wait! Where are you going? Please! We can figure this out. Just talk to me, Kevin pleaded, grabbing her wrist. Jessica yanked her arm away with violent disgust. Her flirtatious demeanor was completely replaced by ice-cold contempt. Don't touch me. You're a pathetic fraud. You acted like some big-shot millionaire, but you were just living off your wife's paycheck. And your mother is a broke, debt-ridden mess. Delete my number. We're done. Jessica spat, turning on her heels and sprinting down the driveway, leaving Kevin to collapse on the porch. Kevin crawled back inside and stared at his mother, who was still weeping on the floor. His world had collapsed in a matter of hours. That was when he realized his father's room was also empty. Arthur had packed up and vanished. He noticed the imprint of where the blue envelope had been on the table. He didn't know his father was already halfway to a peaceful new life. The destruction of the family was absolute. They had no maid to abuse, no money to burn, and no luxury to brag about. All they had were blank walls echoing their own staggering stupidity. Barbara shrieked until her voice gave out, while Kevin sat staring at the red folder in a catatonic state of regret. Jasmine really had taken out the trash, leaving them to rot in their own emptiness. Night fell, blanketing the hollow house in an eerie, terrifying darkness. Kevin was still sitting on the bare floorboards of the living room. His designer resort wear was completely wrinkled and stained with sweat, perfectly mirroring the chaotic state of his mind. The air inside the house grew incredibly stuffy without the central air conditioning. Even the ceiling fans had been removed by the movers. In the corner of the dining room, Barbara continued to weep, mourning her dramatic fall from grace. There was not a shred left of the snobby, elite persona she wore to her country club luncheons. Their stomachs growled painfully, but there wasn't so much as a bottle of water left in the house. The emptiness of the home felt like a cruel, mocking entity. The suffocating silence slowly morphed into a volatile tension. Kevin pushed himself off the floor, his face red with a boiling fury. He walked toward his mother. The sight of the loan shark ledger on the table confirmed that his mother's high society life was a complete illusion built on a mountain of illegal debt. You completely destroyed us! Why the hell did you borrow money from the mob? Was the massive allowance Jasmine gave you every month not enough? Look at us now. My wife took all her money and left, and my girlfriend dumped me because I'm broke. This is all because of your greedy, pathetic obsession with looking rich, Kevin screamed, his voice booming off the empty walls. Barbara snapped her head up, glaring at her son defensively despite knowing she was guilty. You dare blame me? You think you're innocent? Who was the one using his wife's bank account to buy Prada bags for his little tramp? If you were a real man who could control his wife, Jasmine would have never dared to pull a stunt like this. You failed as the head of this household. Barbara shrieked back, her voice raspy from crying. The vicious screaming match between mother and son escalated. They hurled insults, exposed old resentments, and verbally tore each other to shreds without an ounce of familial love left. Just as they were busy destroying each other's sanity, the loud rumble of heavy motorcycle engines and loud diesel trucks pulled up directly in front of the house. The heavy thud of combat boots stomped up the walkway, followed by deafening, violent pounding on the front door, which Kevin hadn't properly secured. The door frame rattled violently. Kevin and Barbara froze, their hearts hammered against their ribs. A horrifying sense of dread washed over them. The door was kicked open. 5 massive, heavily tattooed men wearing black leather jackets stepped into the living room without an ounce of hesitation. The man leading the pack held a rolled-up piece of paper. His cold, dead eyes scanned the entirely empty living room before locking onto Barbara, who was now trembling in the corner like a cornered rat. These were the repo men and debt collectors sent by the private lenders. They didn't care that the house was empty. They were here to collect on a debt that was long overdue. Good evening, Barbara. Nice to finally catch you at home. We've been incredibly patient waiting for you to pay off your massive tabs. The interest has compounded, and my boss says today is the absolute deadline. So, where's our money? The lead enforcer asked, his voice low but dripping with menace. Barbara crawled backward, trying to hide behind Kevin's legs. I don't have the cash on me right now, sir. Please just give me a few more days. We just had a family emergency. Our house was robbed. I swear I'll have the money by next week. Have some mercy, she begged, her voice squeaking pitifully. The lead collector let out a booming, mocking laugh. Mercy? Weren't you just flaunting a new diamond tennis bracelet to your neighbors last week? We're out of excuses. The boss gave strict orders. If there's no cash tonight, we start seizing collateral. The man snapped his fingers, and his crew fanned out. They checked the rooms but groaned in frustration when they found absolutely nothing of value. One of the men walked back in from the driveway and whispered to the leader. The man in the leather jacket turned his sharp gaze to Kevin. Since this house is completely gutted, we're taking the luxury SUV in the driveway to cover this month's interest. Toss me the keys, kid, the man ordered, holding out a scarred, calloused hand. Kevin's eyes widened in horror. That SUV was the absolute last symbol of his wealthy facade, and the auto loan wasn't even fully paid off. No, you can't take that. That car is in my name, not my mother's. You have no legal right to take it. I'll call the cops right now, Kevin threatened, trying to puff out his chest even though his knees were shaking. Two of the massive enforcers lunged forward, grabbing Kevin by the collar of his designer shirt and lifting him until his toes barely touched the floor. Listen closely. You spoiled little brat. We don't care whose name is on the registration. Your mother owes the boss, which means this whole family owes the boss. Hand over the keys right now, or we'll shatter your ribs right in front of her, the enforcer growled, pulling back a massive fist. Absolute terror instantly shattered Kevin's bravado. With violently trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the key fob. The leader snatched it with a triumphant smirk. The men dropped Kevin, letting him crash hard onto the wooden floorboards. Without another word, the crew walked out. Seconds later, the SUV's engine roared to life, and the vehicle peeled out of the driveway, taking the very last shred of the family's dignity with it. Kevin scrambled to the doorway, staring blankly as his car disappeared into the night. At the same time, he noticed a crowd of neighbors gathered on the sidewalks. The same neighbors Barbara used to look down on were now whispering, pointing at the empty house, and openly laughing at their spectacular downfall. There was no pity in their eyes, only deep satisfaction at seeing karma do its work. Unable to bear the crushing humiliation, Kevin slammed the broken door shut and slid down to the floor, hiding in the dark with his weeping mother. That night was the longest, most agonizing night of their lives. A night where karma arrived to collect its dues without an ounce of mercy. Thousands of miles away from that suburban nightmare, the atmosphere was a picture of pure, untouched serenity. A gentle tropical breeze carried the refreshing scent of the ocean. Jasmine walked barefoot along the pristine white sands of Maui. The Hawaiian coast always possessed an unparalleled ability to heal the soul. She wore a flowing, elegant designer sundress, adjusting her wide-brimmed sun hat and fixing her hair as the warm ocean breeze washed over her. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the Pacific sky in breathtaking strokes of vibrant orange, pink, and gold. The rhythmic crashing of the waves against the shore sounded like nature's own symphony, washing away the years of emotional exhaustion. Jasmine paused, closed her eyes, and took a deep, cleansing breath. The pure, salty air filled her lungs, injecting her with a vibrant new energy. Her heart felt incredibly light. There were no more shrill demands to scrub the baseboards. No more turning a blind eye to a cheating husband just to keep a fake peace. No more cooking five-star meals while she was forced to eat the leftovers. Right now, Jasmine had herself, her thriving career, a massive safety net in her private bank account, and a beautiful, unwritten future stretching out before her. She smiled, marveling at how radically her life had transformed in just a matter of months. Walking away and severing those parasites from her life was the greatest decision she had ever made. At that exact moment, in a quiet, picturesque town in Vermont, far from the hustle and bustle of the city, Arthur was enjoying his afternoon in a completely different yet equally joyful way. The rustic cottage Jasmine had leased for him was the ultimate sanctuary for his twilight years. It was solidly built from timber, boasted a massive wraparound porch, and was surrounded by ancient, shading oak trees. Arthur was holding a garden hose, happily watering a vast array of blooming hydrangeas and heirloom tomatoes he had bought from the local farmer's market that morning. A genuine, bright smile was etched onto the older man's face. Since he walked out on his toxic wife, his health had skyrocketed. The crushing anxiety that used to keep him awake at night was completely gone. He felt a decade younger. After finishing his gardening, Arthur washed his hands and sat in a rocking chair on the porch. He brewed a cup of hot chamomile tea, inhaled the soothing aroma, and took a sip filled with profound gratitude. A blue jay chirped from a nearby branch, keeping him company in a solitude that never once felt lonely. He reached into his flannel shirt pocket and pulled out his brand new smartphone, a gift he bought using the cash Jasmine provided. He had specifically asked the store clerk to teach him how to use it so he could stay in touch with his favorite daughter-in-law. Arthur opened FaceTime and dialed Jasmine's number. The call connected in seconds. Jasmine's glowing face appeared on the screen, backed by the stunning Hawaiian sunset and the endless ocean. She waved at the camera with a brilliant smile. "Good evening, Dad. The air out here is incredible. It's so peaceful. What are you up to? Is the cottage treating you well?" Jasmine greeted him, her voice bubbling with joy. Arthur chuckled warmly, waving back at the screen. "Evening, sweetheart." "Same here. I feel absolutely at peace. The weight on my shoulders is completely gone. The cottage is heaven on earth, and the mountain air is so crisp. I just finished watering the garden. It feels so good to finally do the things I love without being yelled at." "You look so happy, Jasmine. You're glowing. You don't look pale and exhausted like you did back at that house." Jasmine wiped a happy tear from the corner of her eye. "You look much healthier too, Dad. Please make sure you're eating well. Use the money I sent to spoil yourself for once. Don't be frugal when it comes to your own happiness. Once my divorce is finalized by the courts, I'm going to fly up to Vermont to visit you." The two of them chatted warmly, just like a biological father and daughter who hadn't seen each other in ages. They talked about Arthur's new tomato plants, the incredible seafood Jasmine was eating, and their simple, meaningful plans for the future. Not once did either of them utter Kevin or Barbara's names. Those people had been permanently deleted from their lives. The conversation lasted until the sky behind Jasmine turned a deep, starry indigo. Jasmine finally said her goodbyes, promising to call again soon, and ended the FaceTime with a full heart. Just as she was slipping her phone into her designer clutch, it buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call, but a long text message. She opened it and saw it was from her high-powered family court attorney back in Los Angeles. Jasmine read the message carefully. Her lawyer informed her that Kevin had just reached out to their office. Kevin had left a pathetic, weeping voicemail, begging for an out-of-court mediation to settle things amicably. The lawyer relayed that Kevin claimed he was still desperately in love with Jasmine and wanted to fix their marriage. Kevin also mentioned that his mother was falling severely ill. They had been evicted, and they had absolutely no money for medical bills. He was begging for Jasmine's mercy to drop the lawsuit and give them access to the funds. Jasmine read the massive block of text without a single muscle twitching in her face. There was no pity. There was no longing. And there was absolutely zero hesitation in her heart. She knew exactly who her husband was. His pleas for reconciliation weren't born out of genuine remorse. They were purely out of panic because he was now destitute and needed his cash cow back to survive. If Jasmine returned, she knew she'd just go back to being an unpaid servant. With swift, decisive keystrokes, Jasmine typed her reply to the attorney. "Proceed with the litigation aggressively. Do not delay a single motion. Ignore all his messages. I refuse any form of mediation, and I refuse to communicate with him outside of a courtroom. There will be no settlement. Make sure the judge sees every single piece of evidence regarding his embezzlement and infidelity, so the ruling crushes him entirely." Jasmine hit send, locked her screen, and walked away from the beach toward her luxury resort. Her steps were confident and steady as she strolled down the lantern-lit pathways. The cool night breeze brushed against her face. She had slammed the door on her past, locking the monsters in the dark. Now, she was walking alone into a brilliantly lit future. The filth that once covered her life had been scrubbed clean. Time passed rapidly, like a relentlessly turning wheel, crushing those who sowed evil and elevating those who endured with grace. Several months had passed since the day that house of lies imploded. At the family court, the divorce proceedings between Jasmine and Kevin reached a highly satisfying conclusion. The judge granted every single one of Jasmine's petitions without exception. The court reviewed the undeniable photographic evidence of the affair and the bank wires proving Kevin's financial abuse. Kevin never even showed up to the hearings. He simply couldn't afford a lawyer, and he couldn't even scrape together the bus fare to get to the courthouse. His absence made the legal process incredibly swift. That day, Jasmine walked out of the courthouse with a brilliant smile, holding the official decree that declared her entirely free from the agonizing marriage. But Kevin's destruction didn't end in the courtroom. The wheels of karma spun viciously. annihilating the corporate career he was so arrogant about. Jasmine had mailed the red folder containing the photos of the affair and the financial documents directly to the HR department at the firm where Kevin and Jessica worked. The company had a strict morality and anti-embezzlement clause for its executives. It took HR less than 48 hours to conclude their internal investigation. Kevin and Jessica were fired immediately, stripped of their severance packages, and escorted out of the building by security. Kevin's professional reputation in the industry was incinerated. Jessica, deeply humiliated and furious over losing her lucrative job, blocked Kevin on everything and vanished, leaving him to face bankruptcy alone. Without a job, without a car, and constantly hunted by debt collectors, Kevin's physical health rapidly deteriorated. The crippling stress destroyed his immune system, leaving him severely ill, bedridden, and entirely helpless. Barbara's fate was equally tragic. The extreme arrogance that defined her entire personality had been washed away by a relentless hurricane of misery. She had also received official court documents finalizing Arthur's divorce from her. Her ex-husband didn't ask for any alimony, but he also refused to pay her a single dime in spousal support, noting that the loan sharks had already seized whatever assets they had left. Without a husband to berate, without a daughter-in-law to fund her life, and stuck with a chronically ill, unemployed son, Barbara was forced to swallow the most bitter pill of reality. The loan sharks eventually forced them out, seizing the suburban house to cover the remaining debts. Barbara and Kevin were banished to a filthy, cramped motel room in a rundown, dangerous part of the city, a place where the sun barely pierced through the smog. The motel walls were covered in black mold, the air was suffocating, and the ceiling leaked dirty water every time it rained. To keep them from starving and to buy cheap, over-the-counter medicine for Kevin, the elderly Barbara had to throw away whatever was left of her pride. The woman who once dripped in gold jewelry and designer clothes now had to wake up before dawn. She bought cheap baked goods and umbrellas in bulk, loaded them into a battered plastic bin, and stood on a busy street corner, peddling them to passing commuters from dawn until dusk. Her aging body, completely unaccustomed to physical labor, ached and throbbed constantly. But she had no choice. If she didn't sell anything, she and her son didn't eat. Often, Barbara would break down in tears on the sidewalk when her feet blistered or when commuters ignored her. Her mind would constantly drift back to the days when Jasmine flawlessly catered to her every whim without her ever having to lift a finger. One late afternoon, the sky turned a menacing shade of dark gray. A torrential downpour unleashed upon the city without warning. The wind howled, dropping the temperature and chilling the air to the bone. Barbara, who was standing on the corner trying to sell her muffins, couldn't find a decent place to take cover. She huddled beneath the small awning of an upscale bakery that had already closed, desperately trying to keep her plastic bin of goods dry. Her tattered clothes clung to her freezing skin, her face was deathly pale, and her legs shook from severe exhaustion. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face, mixing with the cold rain. She thought of Kevin, who was currently hacking up his lungs in their leaky motel room, burning with a high fever. She had barely sold anything today. There would be no food tonight. Just as she was drowning in her own pathetic misery, a sleek, jet-black luxury SUV parted the puddles on the street and glided to a smooth halt directly in front of her. The quiet hum of the high-end engine caused Barbara to slowly lift her heavy head. She stared at the vehicle with a mix of awe and anxiety, terrified that the tires would splash dirty water onto her. Slowly, the tinted front passenger window rolled down. As the glass lowered, Barbara's heart practically stopped in her chest. Her eyes widened to the size of saucers, refusing to believe what she was seeing. Sitting in the driver's seat was a woman she recognized instantly, yet she looked remarkably different. It was Jasmine. She looked unimaginably elegant, wearing a stunning designer trench coat, her hair perfectly styled, and a pair of chic sunglasses resting on her head. Jasmine's face was bright, youthful, and radiated an aura of absolute peace. The tired, defeated look she used to wear in Barbara's house was completely gone. But the real shock was sitting in the passenger seat. There sat Arthur, her ex-husband. He looked incredibly healthy, wearing a crisp, tailored button-down shirt. He was smiling peacefully, resting a large, expensive-looking bakery box on his lap that wafted the smell of fresh, gourmet pastries into the cold air. They looked exactly like a successful daughter treating her beloved father to a wonderful day in the city. The realization that her ex-husband and her former daughter-in-law were living in absolute luxury and happiness while she rotted in the gutter completely shattered whatever was left of Barbara's sanity. Her body began to convulse violently, not from the freezing rain, but from the agonizing, soul-crushing regret burning in her chest. She dropped her plastic bin of cheap muffins onto the wet concrete, no longer caring about her livelihood. With a frantic, limping gait, tears pouring from her eyes like a river, she rushed through the torrential rain toward the luxury SUV. Her wet, wrinkled hands gripped the edge of the window. She looked back and forth between Jasmine and Arthur with the most pathetic, heart-wrenching gaze imaginable. "Jasmine, Arthur, please, please help me. Take me with you, I'm begging you," Barbara wailed, her voice cracking over the sound of the pounding rain. Kevin is incredibly sick in a motel room. He can't stop coughing, his fever is so high. We don't have a dime for food or a doctor. Forgive me, Jasmine. Forgive my arrogance. I will beg on my knees in the mud if I have to. Just please, save my son. Arthur slowly turned his head to look at his ex-wife, who was drenched and looking utterly pathetic. Not a single muscle in Arthur's face twitched with sympathy. For years, she had trampled on his dignity. For years, she had repaid his kindness with venom. The door of forgiveness in Arthur's heart had been permanently welded shut. Arthur looked away, staring straight out the windshield, and spoke to Jasmine. "Let's get going, sweetheart. Don't waste our time here. The pastries are going to get cold," Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly calm and icy, treating Barbara as if she were nothing more than a gust of wind. Hearing her ex-husband's ruthless dismissal, Barbara sobbed even louder. "Arthur, don't be so cruel. He's your own flesh and blood," she shrieked miserably. Jasmine looked deep into her former mother-in-law's eyes. There was no mocking smirk, but there was absolutely zero pity. Jasmine's gaze was that of an undisputed victor who had completely closed the book on her past. She reached toward the door panel and pressed a button. The tinted glass window began to slowly glide upward. Through the narrowing gap, Jasmine delivered her final parting words. Her voice perfectly calm, but the impact far deadlier than the swing of an executioner's blade. "Sorry, Barbara. The SUV is full for the people I actually value. You just stay out there in the street and clean up the puddles." The window sealed shut with a soft click, completely cutting off the sound of Barbara's hysterical wails. Jasmine eased off the brake and smoothly pressed the accelerator. The luxury SUV glided effortlessly through the storm, leaving the dark, rotting past firmly in the rearview mirror. On the side of the road, Barbara lost the strength in her legs. She couldn't support the crushing weight of her own regret anymore. She collapsed to her knees in the dirty puddle, pounding her fists against the wet asphalt, screaming into the unforgiving storm. In that moment, she finally realized the most bitter truth of her life. She was the true parasite. And now, she had to wither away and die in the gutter, because the tree she had once leached off of had grown too tall and strong for her to ever reach again. All the trash had truly been taken out, delivering the most flawless, absolute justice. Jasmine's patience and courage had yielded the ultimate reward, proving that those who plant the seeds of suffering for good people will inevitably reap a hurricane of destruction for themselves. The pain was finally over, replaced by an eternal victorious smile.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry. I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry. I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home, so I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay. Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you.